Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of His eye. Let's get to work. Shabbat Shalom, family. We are blessed to be able to be here again to continue in our study. We're looking at the same theme, which is to build a righteous nation using the Most High's blueprint. And during the course of this year, part of that theme that we're looking at is how to find your tribe. So we've been spending time talking about that as it relates to who the Most High has us to be, which is a nation not only of priests, but also, as the New Testament describes, a nation of kings and priests. So that's how we're looking at the notion of leadership in the Most High's kingdom. As always, we are guided by 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, instructing us to study, to show ourselves approved unto the Most High, workmen who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, and that all scripture is God-breathed and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the person of the Most High may be complete, thoroughly furnished to every good work. So we're going to begin our study with reading a couple of scriptures. It says, as a fellow elder, this is 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 5. As a fellow elder, a witness of Christ's sufferings and a partaker of the glory to be revealed, I appeal to the elders among you. Be shepherds of the Most High's flock that is among you, watching over them not out of compulsion, but because it is Yahuwah's will, not out of greed, but out of eagerness, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. So we're going to use that as our starting point for our lesson on this during this session, and we'll be covering a couple of other scriptures as well. Let's look at where we were last time, the leadership of the nation, and we looked starting with Moses actually, about how he operated as a leader and some of the attributes that he exhibited in Exodus chapter 12, verse 21, and how also in Exodus chapter 18, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, gives instructions to Moses on how to be the best leader and the most efficient leader with the charge that he had been given. So he gave him a system, if you will, of getting others to help him as he conducted the blessing that the Most High had given to him as the leader of his people, of that nation. And again, that nation is a kingdom of priests, as Exodus chapter 19 says. And that nation is the people called by the name of the Most High. So when we talk about the nation and leadership in the nation, we're talking about the Most High's nation, the ones who have been given his name. That was then, and as we come through history, we find that there were other named individuals that we don't often see or think of as part of the leadership of the nation of the Most High. But at some point, we're going to be looking at Harriet Tubman, Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, Frederick Douglass, and then some of the more modern day or more contemporary names that you may be familiar with. Obviously, Dr. King being the name that most people can resonate with, but these names are not usually considered in the category of national people with a national assignment to the Most High's people, and so that's why we're going to be looking at that as well. But for today, we're asking the question based on our last study, which is about the tribe. If you remember, part of the unction for this year is to find your tribe and begin to operate with that tribe. So the question that we start out with in this lesson is, have you found your tribe yet? As we know, a tribe starts out as a family group, but not necessarily and exclusively your bloodline family, but it does start there. So if we were to go to Matthew chapter 12, verses 46 through 50, I think it actually is worth us doing that so that we can hear from Scripture and see in the Scripture how that relates to finding one's tribe. This is, again, Matthew chapter 12, starting at verse 46. And it says, while he being Yeshua, yet talked to the people, behold, his mother and his brethren stood without, desiring to speak with him. Then one said unto him, behold, your mother and your brothers stand outside, desiring to speak with you, or stand without, desiring to speak with you. But he answered and said unto him that told him, who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples and said, behold, my mother and my brethren, for whosoever shall do the will of my Father, which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. So we wanted to start with that as our understanding of where the Most High is coming from. When we talk about find your tribe, we're talking about the same tribe that Yeshua identified, and he identified his disciples, and his disciples were identified as those who do the will of the Father. Okay, so now we'll go back and look once more. Matthew 12:46 46 just told us that whoever does the will of the Father is the tribe. Okay, now we also learned in the last couple of weeks how that group of tribes that were the children of Jacob, whose name was changed to Yasharal, those 12 tribes became a nation. So we're still looking at that same theme. And any nation must have leaders or elders. So who is to lead the tribe? The elders of the nation are to lead the tribe. And if you were to read the rest of Exodus chapter 12, where Exodus chapter 18, where Moses is given those suggestions that turn into instructions to from his father-in-law. What we find is his father-in-law told him, okay, you get the word from the Most High like you always have, but then gather the elders of your nation, if you will, and give that to them. The way that Jethro described it, find people who will be the heads of thousands, who will be the head of hundreds, who will be the heads of 50s, who will be the heads of tens of people. And that's how you get the blessing of the Father, the blessing that the Father gave to you, to the rest of your nation. And it's the same blessing. So it's not one of those things where when one man tells whispers in another person's ear, and then you go around the circle and each one is supposed to whisper the same thing, but by the time it gets back around to the person who started it, it sounds nothing like what the person started. Well, this way ensures that that doesn't happen. So we're going to be looking at what actually constitutes an elder. Okay. Is age the only criteria? Okay. And by the way, according to the Hebrew word, which is zaken or zakain, it just means the old, and that can be either men or women. Now, most of the time in the nation, it is men, but Abraham and Sarah were both called by that Hebrew name. So both of them were elders. Okay. But it doesn't have to do with just those who are old. Okay. So we're going to be looking at First Peter. We're going to be looking at Titus, and we're going to be looking at First Timothy. Okay. Why are we looking at these three scriptures? It's because we're still underneath the study of how do you pick your leaders. And so we do know that the leader and the elder, in some cases, as we look at how the nation is to be configured, those words are synonymous. Okay. So if we were to go to First Peter chapter 5, it talks about the shepherds of the flock, and he's talking actually to the elders, and he says that you are to be shepherds of the Most High's flock. So part of the job of an elder, part of the job of a leader, is to be a shepherd to someone else's flock. And that's a very crucial point. This is how that which comes down from heaven must be given. Okay. Elders are shepherds of the flock that belongs to the Most High, or that belongs to Yeshua. Okay. So First Peter chapter 5, verses 2 and 3 says, to be shepherds of Yahuwah's flock that is among you, watching over them, not out of compulsion, but because it is Yahuwah's will. The person who is in the position of the shepherd does so not because they're made to, but because the Most High said, this is my will for you in the assignment that I've given to you. And so they're also not to be doing that out of greed, but out of eagerness to serve. Therefore, they will not lord it over those that are entrusted to them, but they will actually lead by example. That's where that concept comes from. When we hear people talking about lead by example, and unfortunately, many of the people who say leaders have to lead by example don't do that. Okay. They still operate as if it's their edict that people should follow just because they said whatever they said. But that's not what a true leader does. A true leader does not lord it over those. A true leader actually leads by example. And so First Peter chapter 5 says that. Now, when we get to Titus chapter 1, it talks about how those individuals are to be chosen. And actually, First Timothy chapter 3 does the same thing. So that's what we're going to be spending the rest of this few minutes on. Okay. So there is a qualification that is required of anyone in the Most High's kingdom who is serving as one of the primary leaders. And that's why the question that's on the right is so important. And whether you're the person who may desire that role of leadership, or whether you're the people who are to identify those persons who will be in that position of leadership, there are qualifications that must be fulfilled in order for a person to sit in the Most High's nation, in the Most High's kingdom, in the position of a leader. Okay, so what are those qualifications? What you see on the screen, this is what I'm suggesting that you do. You use this as your template for determining whether or not you have a biblically sanctioned individual in the position of leadership in your group of people. Because don't forget, it starts at the top, and then there are people over thousands, there are people over hundreds, there are people over 50s, there are people over 10s, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what are those qualifications? And that's where Titus comes in, and 1 Timothy chapter 3 comes in. So what you see on the screen here are Titus chapter 1 and 1 Timothy chapter 3 when it comes to the qualifications of what we call an elder. Now, there are also qualifications of deacons, but right now, these are the people who we would consider to be in the position of leadership in the nation. So whether you're looking for a minister to lead a congregation, let me not start with the minister. Let me start with the place where this is supposed to be worked out before you get to any of those other positions. This is why the Shema is so important, because you're supposed to be able to find these attributes in your own house. Someone in your house, the person in your house that is the leader of the house, is supposed to have these qualities. Okay, and then it begins to be manifested in the community of or the society that in which you live. Okay, so this is the template, and the yes or no. So first of all, at the top there are qualifications. That's what we're looking at in one column. In the other column, the yes or no is just for you to check. Okay, is the person, whether it's the one in the mirror or whether it's someone else that desires to be in that position, if they check that, or if they fulfill that, then you put a check mark there. So as you go through, here is what the Most High said his leaders look like. Okay, so the first qualification, the husband of but one wife. That's where we start with those who will lead the Most High's people. Having children who are believers. See, that's why we were saying what has to happen first is that these things have to be manifested in your own house. That's where it starts. The husband of one wife, children who are believers, and if the children are believers, they're also obeyers. So a true leader will have children who are also underneath the authority of that leader, and they live that way. In the King James Version, it says, who has faithful children. Okay, children who are full of faith, but also children who can be counted on to do what they're supposed to do. That's the kind of person that you pick as a leader, someone whose children can be observed doing that. That person is seen as the Most High's steward. A steward is a servant. So any leader is going to be a servant, not just of the Most High, but of his household. that person is also to be above reproach. In other words, you have a good reputation. You're above the petty snipes, if you will. That person is to not be self-absorbed. Looking at the qualifications, can you check that off for yourself or for those who would lead you? Okay. Not quick-tempered. Leaders must be even-tempered to be a leader in the nation that the Most High is establishing. Not given to drunkenness, not violent, not greedy for money, hospitable, a lover of that which is good. And then it goes on to say an elder or a leader must be self-controlled, upright, holy. Now, the word holy, so that we're on the same page, means set apart. So that person has already seen a need to set themselves apart from the foolishness of the world so that they can be used by the Most High. So upright, holy, and disciplined. And that person will hold firmly to the faithful word as it was taught. Now, this is kind of far down the list, but that is so important. This concept of putting individuals in positions of leadership that have been underneath the tutelage of someone else that has given them very specifically the word that came down from heaven. So we're not talking about somebody who says, Jesus told me to tell y'all. That's not what this is talking about. It says, hold firmly to the faithful word as it was taught. So in essence, the elder had to have surrendered themselves to the discipline of someone who had already surrendered themselves and then was faithful to the words that that person taught them. Okay. A leader also encourages others by sound teaching. A leader is also able to refute those who contradict what that which comes down from heaven has said. But please notice that in the order, refuting those who contradict is at the bottom, not the top. So in our nation, when you look at what the nation needs to be in the center of the will of the Most High, the nation needs individuals who he can rely on to exhibit these traits. And once they can exhibit those traits, then they are qualified to be an elder. Now, this is where it gets to, we're talking about elders. It starts with elders. If you look up that word elder, it literally means to be old. Okay. But it's not talking exclusively about old. This is being old in the positive sense of the word, because when we are older, we can draw upon the experiences that we had when we were younger. Some of those experiences led us to conduct ourselves as these qualifications said. Some of our experiences led us away from conducting ourselves as these qualifications explain, but we learned from that and decided the qualifications are how I should live. Okay, so that takes time. It takes time to work with your own children and to pour life into your own children and pour responsibility and self-discipline, and all of these other attributes that we just talked about into your own children in order for you to be able to help someone else in their family. And so that's the whole purpose. So when we look from a religious mindset as to who is to lead the church, let's just talk about the church for a second. This is the pattern. Anyone who is in a position of leadership in the church, from heaven's perspective, has a list of criteria that they must be able to address. And that's what we just read. They have to be the husband of one wife. Their children have to be underneath subjection. They have to see themselves as a servant or a steward of the Most High rather than a lorded over person. They have to be above reproach. In other words, they have to be of good character. They have to, see, it says not self-absorbed. And if you're not self-absorbed, that means that yourself is invested into the well-being of others. Not quick-tempered, not at the bar drinking all the time, or even in the office drinking all the time. So all of these things, I'm not going to go through all of them again, but if you're just talking about the church, let's just talk about the church for a second. Your leaders need to look like this. If they don't, you need to go somewhere else, or pray that the Father will turn the person who is in the position of leadership into this person that he expects. But if the congregation is coming together to choose a leader, you have your template. I don't care what your discipline says. I don't care what your protocol says. I don't care what your Talmud says. This is the standard. And when you follow that standard, there's a blessing there. When you don't follow that standard, you have a dead church, or a church that is out of order. Okay, so that's just the church. I'm encouraging you to say, as an individual and as a collective group of people, this is how all of our leaders should be looking. If it starts in the home, it shouldn't just stop at the church. It should also be exhibited in the mayor's office, or in the city council seat, or in the person who is in control of the city's budget, or the person who is in control of developing an educational program that will actually bring life and blessing to the children that they are over. When you find people like this and put them in our nation, in the positions that are needed in the nation, we will have a thriving nation. And that, brothers and sisters, is what is on the horizon for us as we move forward. So that's the blessing we have for this Shabbat. The Father bless you and keep you. The Father make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Father lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.